All right, everybody, welcome to the Billy and Joe Top 10 Show. I've always wanted to do this. I've always wanted to start a show and then have a guest host. You know, like Johnny Carson back in the Tonight Show. And our guest host is Adam Hamby,
Yeah, not
who
Joan Rivers.
who runs Mini Courts, the Land of Mini Courts on Facebook. Does a fabulous job. If you look on the screen there, you can see my Broaderpool court. And if you look behind Adam, you can see some of the courts that he has made. They're absolutely fantastic. I love mine. He also has a YouTube channel called Hoosier Garage. Adam is multi talented. I am not. So, Adam, thank you so much for joining the show.
No problem.
We are going to talk today about our top five radio stations growing up and our top five disc jockeys. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, something like that. I think mine interchanged. Like, I think you've talked about music groups, like who's your favorite. I'm one of those types where it might change, and I don't like to say, oh, this one's number one. But these are in the top five. They'll give them my top five. So
Now, the nice thing, of course, Joe Carney, who has a podcast called Indy's Local Flavor, we do it. It's the top 10 show, but Joe always comes to me with 20 plus one, which is his bonus pick. And I'm never really ready for it. I don't know how many bonus picks he's going to have. I don't know what he's going to roll out, so I always come prepared. But before we get started, I would like to pay a bill and play a commercial for you guys.
Remember, don't get stuck with another sticker company. Stick with StickerYeti.com for all of your sticker needs and much, much more. Sticker Yeti is the place for all of your needs when it comes to stickers. Check them out today.
As you can see, our sponsor is StickerYeti.com in the upper left-hand corner. I also host a podcast. I guess you can call it a variety show now. It's not just about Indiana basketball from the state of Indiana. And you can find that at Keeping the Nostalgia Alive. That's all one word, keepingthenostalgialive.podbean.com. You can also find my YouTube channel at the Keeping the Nostalgia Live Show. Just type that in on YouTube and check out all of our videos. It's a variety of videos. I try to stay with, one subject, but me and Adam can't. So, and also too, like I just told you, go to Hoosier Garage also and subscribe on YouTube and subscribe to our channel, the Keeping the Nostalgia Live Show. So, Adam, tell us a little bit about why did you bring up this topic?
I think radio is a medium that's being lost, and it's a great theater of the mind type situation. You know, we have TV, we have YouTube, and we're progressing into this. But before, you had to be known on radio in so many ways, whether it was before TV, even during early TV, people had it on in the cars. They still do, but there is a lost art to it, and I think that's sad because so many stations that have existed have done it so well, and now a lot of that is lost to conglomerations, corporations, and it's fine if that's kind of the where it's went, but it just you wish that there was the talent and the creativity that there used to be. A lot of it's very homogenous now, and actually some of my favorite stations have resorted to that, and it's not as enjoyable as it used to be. Many of the radio people themselves will tell you it used to be better, uh, and a lot of it is political, this, that, and the other with it. But a lot of them don't have their jobs anymore because it's either given to automation or just looking at the bottom line. So, in short, radio has been a great entertainment source, creativity, and just power, in a lot of ways. So it's always been very interesting to me. I like historical aspects of radio because that's where kind of the fun of it is, and the bad part of it is looking at where it's going, and it's not that great. So it's kind of a two-edged sword, I guess.
Adam, how old are you?
I am 37.
37. I am 53. So let me give you a little bit of rundown of what radio was like for me. I won over $5,000 in cash.
$5,000.
Over $5,000 in cash. I won the cash song twice on Q95. I won on WZPL, which we'll talk about later, They had a contest where if we play more than one song from an artist during the day, you call us up and we'll give you $1,000. So I Want to Know What Love Is was playing that morning by Foreigner. And then probably 3 hours later, I was in the Broad Ripple area, and they played Midnight Blue by Lou Gramm.
Yeah.
So I thought Lou Gramm was a part of Foreigner. So WZPL, Apple is our middle name. I don't know if you remember that. I said, yeah, you guys played I Want to Know What Love Is earlier in the day, and then you just played Midnight Blue by Lou Gramm. You go, yeah, you won $1,000.
You won, yeah.
2 weeks later, I go down Meridian Avenue towards the Monument Circle, and I pick up $1,000 check. But also, previously to that, on WZPL in 1985, just before prom at Broad Ripple High School, I also won another $1,000 by calling up. I don't remember what that was all about. And my brother was getting ready to be born, and I wanted another $1,000, and I went and got that, and I bought a Sanyo stereo system. Sanyo. Look it up. Sanyo stereo system.
Oh, yeah.
It was cheap as shit back then. Oops, I said the S word. But it was fantastic for me, and plus I had a little money left over for prom. And so let me get you a little bit further here on my love of Indianapolis radio, which was, I won over 500 albums from WNAP, from WZPL, from Q95. I mean, the list goes on and on. I thank God the IRS does not know what I won off the radio, or I would be in trouble. So, with the phone and the 25, my, dialing the phone numbers there was a contest where, at the end of playing all these songs, if you called up and you were the ninth caller, you won every album. You won every album that the singles we played were off of. So I would go up on Meridian Street at WNAP/WIBC and pick up stacks of albums. So I was just so good at that, and I really enjoyed that. So that's my little run on. I won the cash song twice. One of my questions was, you've won $95. Our question to see if you can win $195 is, who has the most strikeouts ever in Major League Baseball. Of course, my guess was Babe Ruth, but it was Reggie Jackson at that time, back in 1985, 86, or 87. But I do love Indianapolis local radio, just because of the nostalgia. And so I have divulged too much information, so let's continue.
Well, that's good. And if you ask if I remember ZPL, WZPL, Greenfield, Indianapolis, continuous hit rock, indies, hottest music. Like that. Good stuff.
So let's start with number 5. Your number 5 favorite radio station in Indianapolis.
Well, I'll have to go a little bit outside of the Indianapolis market here on this. And I have a few of them. Probably number 5, and you can get it in Indianapolis, but it's WLW-AM in Cincinnati. And if you're not familiar with WLW, they are the home of the Reds, and they are mostly talk now. But they had some eclectic programming. Overnights, they would have the Truckin' Bozo, who would pretty much cater to the truckers, and it was almost like an interactive type of broadcast. His son, Steve Summers, takes care of that now. But you also had, during the afternoons, Gary Burbank, who we'll get into later as one of his favorite DJs if we venture that far. But if you're not familiar with Gary was one of the most talented radio people. And he did a show called, or a segment in his show called Sports or Consequences. And it's much like the strikeout question. People would ask him and his board a question, and it was very high-spirited, very fun type of programming, and they would try to stump him in the game. If they were stumped truly, then the person would usually win a prize. But usually they would counter with an answer and it would be correct, and they would always end with the whole gang going, we don't mess around, hey. And they would do that for about an hour, and it was just madcap. The whole hour of that was just crazy. Plus, he always did the old prank calls where he would be somebody else and call and sound like a senile old man and all this sort of thing. So WLW always had some very outgoing personalities, and it was very, very interesting to listen to that station. It was almost macho, the whole station, but I think it's probably changed in recent years. So WLW would be at number 5.
Isn't it interesting too how you could listen to stations a lot better at night just because of the AM frequency?
Yeah, it's the whole skywave. It's the whole science of it. Especially on cloudy nights, the signal would bounce underneath the clouds, and I learned that from my dad when I was real young. We would listen to faraway stations at night, particularly when it was cloudy. You would notice, and you would get them a lot better.
Yeah, WLW is a great choice. I don't even know if my number 5 is even around anymore, and it's WXTZ.
XTZ.
And they had this, and it was on the end of the FM dial. And at Christmas time, they were one of the first stations to play Christmas music, beginning on the 23rd and ending on the 26th. And just when you had my dad had that station on, it was in stereo and it was in Indianapolis. And when my dad had that on, you were just thinking about Christmas and what the true meaning of Christmas was.
In the right mood.
Yeah, around all the time at Smooth, the WXTZ, and they played Christmas music.
Was that 107.9 by chance?
Yes, I think it was. And if it wasn't playing that, it was playing orchestral music or soft music.
It was usually when you was at the end of the radio dial like that. I think they later became WTPI.
Okay.
And they usually, like even in the Louisville market, that end of the FM spectrum is usually the softer, the lighter, the work at home music. So yeah, I do remember TPI. I do not probably remember before that.
Okay, so what's your number 4?
Number 4 would be another out-of-stater, WNBC New York. Now, this is actually what you would call more retrospective look back, because WNBC AM went away in 1988. That's when I think General Electric had bought NBC, and they said, we're not going to do radio. But at NBC, although not my favorite by far, that's where Howard Stern became somebody in New York, and he feuded with Don Imus, who I did like Imus.
Imus in the morning.
Yeah, and actually I have that. Imus in the morning. So yeah, we have a little bit of that. And what I liked about them, and a lot of stations at that time went into what they called full service, where you have news, you have talk, you have sports, and you have music. And in the evenings or the overnights, they would have an all-night oldies show, which mimicked the old WABC. So it was just loaded to the brim with jingles and high energy and all this, crazy stuff. And of course, it being a New York station, everybody was kind of bombastic on their own. So I'd say WNBC in a more retrospective fashion.
Very interesting. Very interesting. My number 4 would be WIBC.
WIBC. And we have a WIBC.
Roll it out.
Right here.
Radio Indiana. WIBC. Indianapolis.
And right after that, you would be like, is my school closed for snow?
Or is it burned down?
Exactly. Oh my gosh, WIBC was the greatest. With we're going to get into our list of disc jockeys and stuff like that with Gary Todd and
Gary Todd.
Bob Lamey. Oh my gosh, I just remembered being in bed and just hearing that. What great nostalgia, Adam. Because listening to that, and you're like, well, crap, I'm going to have to get up. We're going to have to go to school. This is in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. You got to listen to the Indiana Pacers. It was man, that just brings a smile to my face to hear that WIBC intro.
Yes, WIBC was very good. And actually, if we want to curtail that into my number three, that would be WIBC, and that's basically due to just the general connection to Indiana, Indianapolis. It's kind of your generic station, but not in a bad way. You have your sports. You have, like you said, Bob Lamy. I actually have the Bob Lamy Indianapolis Racers record, 45 record, floating around here somewhere. And he was very, almost too excited when they would score a goal.
Oh my gosh! And we would have. I had a transistor radio which I turned on really low. You put underneath the pillow, and you put your left ear, your right ear down on it, and you can listen to Bob Lamy talk about the lowly Pacers games.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you had Jerry Baker and all those guys on there, which are and I can't the helicopter guy.
Oh my
Big
gosh!
John
What was
Gillis.
his? Yes, Big John
He had
Gillis.
handlebars and
Yep, and unfortunately, he passed away like 6 or 7 years ago. That was so sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that would probably be like my number three. So.
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. So my number two would be WNAP. You can call it the Eagle. You can call it the Buzzard. Roll out something for me.
The Wrath of the Buzzard. WNAP, Indianapolis.
Oh man, I remember going up those steps because WIBC was on the right, WNAP was on the left when you'd go up on the Meridian Studios to collect my prizes, like we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And oh man, WNAP was the greatest. You know, the interesting thing is from WNAP. I know in like 77 to 79 there was Adam Smasher.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Who, very interesting, was the father of Abraham Ben Ruby, who took pictures for the Broad Ripple High School newspaper, which I was the editor of my senior year. And of course, Abraham Ben Ruby is a great character actor now in movies and TV.
Okay, well, yeah, I've heard of Adam Smasher. I think they highlight him quite a bit on one of the indie nostalgia pages.
I agree.
I knew his last name was Ben Ruby in real life. His stage name Adam Smasher.
Right.
Yeah, so very interesting group right there.
Okay, so roll in the number. You're number two, right?
I think I'm at number two, and when I get to the one and two, I get kind of not sure, but I think I will have to do a dual number two. So we'll have to split it here. At number two, the one most people will be familiar with would be Q95, and here's some Q95.
WFBQ Indianapolis. Indie Rocks on FBQ95.
So there's Q95. That's from 1982. That's actually pre-Bob and Tom. Q95 is one of those where they're more nostalgic for me because if you listen to them now, they have some good personalities, but you don't hear them very much, and they only play like literally a handful of songs. Back in the day, I think a lot of the Q95, for me, being a child, when it was really at the pinnacle, was their marketing, their branding. And I learned a little bit from that because you would see Q95 stickers everywhere. You'd see Bob and Tom stickers everywhere. You would see billboards. And that always kind of stuck with me. It was like, if you want to be noticed, have a color scheme, a brand, and a look, and be kind of in your face about it. And I think that works. That still works, and it worked for them. And they're actually still carrying, or they're riding on the coattails of that now. And so Q95, and it's dual. Like I said, this is a number two. It's sharing number two with me with a station that is kind of in the same predicament. They used to be absolutely amazing. It was a full service station, so they had the music, talk, news, sports all together, and that would be out of Louisville, Kentucky.
84 WHAS.
84 WHAS. They had one of my favorite disc jockeys on there, And I would say the past 20 years they have went down, 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 and it's very, somebody young listening to it now goes, well, what's so great about that? Well, I would have to agree. What's so great about it now? So WHAS out of Louisville and Q95 out of Indianapolis.
So have you ever been to the Q95 studios?
I have not, no.
Off of Fall Creek Road.
Yeah, it's up on Fall Creek, yeah.
Yep. And if you go down 56th Street, which turns into Kessler, have you ever seen the Pimp House that's on Kessler?
Yes, I have.
It changes every year, and this past
they build onto it or something, yeah.
Yeah, this past couple of weeks, I went back to Indianapolis, which I was kind of disappointed with because all of the chuck holes, which made me feel like I was in a whack-a-mole game.
Yeah.
But I went by the Pimp's house, and if you just before you get to the Pimp's house, you go by Cathedral High School, and if you make a right on Fall Creek Road, you go to Q95 Studios. So there was nothing like Q95. So your number 2 is a split between Louisville and Q95.
Yes.
Okay, and what did I claim was my number 2?
Wasn't it ZPL?
WZPL, yes. Okay. My number 1 is WFBQ, Q95. Okay. I mean, I just, my God, there is so much stuff. Mark Patrick, Mark Storin, if you want to call his real name, Bob and Tom, Jimmy Mad Dog Matus, Laura Steele, Christy,
Christy Lee, Ace Cosby.
Oh yeah, I mean all of those. A lot of people will say, put it on whatever frequency and rip off the knob. There was no reason to rip off the knob, but it was always on Q95. I mean, and I love the music programming that they did. But once we get to the love of music, we kind of expand ourselves and make our own personal collections. But Q95 was just,
it was very expansive in the day, I would say, which is the ironic thing about now. They are not. I mean, you could turn it on now and hear a song, and in about 5 hours, you will hear that same song again. And we're talking classic rock. We're not talking about, the classic rock genre has changed so much in 20 years. And WNAP, we was talking about that earlier. They was around in the 60s and 70s, and then they came back in the 90s, and their playlist was much more expansive in the 90s with 70s and 80s stuff than anything that Q95 is now, which is sad.
Very, very. Yeah. And it's really sad to see these kind of these shows, these stations kind of go away. It's very sad.
Definitely.
So who do you have as number 1?
Number 1. Now this will be another historical one because they are long gone. Well, they're not long gone actually. I would say it's like many of the other ones where they still exist, but they're not in their prime. We'll say that. And this one's a weird one, especially if you're not familiar with radio. And number 1 is CKLW. Now, when you have a C, that usually means you're in Canada, and that is true. You're in Canada, but this was across from Detroit. It was in Windsor, Ontario, and they was one of the largest hit stations in the 60s and early 70s. They was actually billed as the number 1 station in North America for a few years, and they had a lot of talent going through there. Actually, if you're familiar with Charlie Van Dyke, he does a lot of voiceovers for much of the TV and radio industry. And if you remember WTHR's logos, when they would come on the news, it would go WTHR, Indianapolis. That was Charlie Van Dyke. Well, he started, at least early on in his career at CKLW. And it was a top 40 station. And they usually would break a lot of hits. They would break a lot of stuff out of Detroit, which was, of course, Motown. And so they had the Motown, they would play country, they would play rock, they would play soul. And they just had an online or a radio presence. They had people that knew how to engineer an AM transmitter to where it sounded good. It had bass. It had the right amount of treble, which AM typically doesn't have. Some people considered it almost FM quality, just without the stereo effect. But we have one of their jingles here. This was probably their most famous one.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the $1 Million Weekend. CKLW, the Motor City.
And that was CKLW. And usually that little liner in there, it might have the name of the jock that was on. And they kind of went in two transitions. In the late 60s, it was very almost sterile, but they had all the music. They just had all the music. But when it got into the 70s, they got more personalities. They got people that was borderline crazy in there. One guy quit on the air one night because I think he was on drugs or something. But he basically got himself fired. And it was just kind of a crazy station, but it was very powerful. 50,000 watts. It could have been heard throughout most of North America. So, and I just always kind of enjoy listening to old clips of the station. And CKLW is my number one.
Do you remember WIFE?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That was a great channel. Do you remember WFMS, which was a country channel? Neither one of us had talked about a country channel.
Yeah, my brothers was really into FMS, and I would consider that a listenable station back in the day as well.
Right. Very cool. So, like I said, I was a kid of the 80s, and being able to win on radio contests was just fantastic with everything that I won. I probably went to 125 to 150 concerts for free.
Wow.
From winning tickets from WNAP, WFBQ, WFMS. WFMS, I won tickets for me and my dad to go see Hank Williams Jr. Let's see, who else was on that tab? Ronnie Millsap and who's the guy who played the Mandarin? It's a small guitar, Ricky Skaggs.
Ricky Skaggs, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I won tickets to go see Eric Clapton, Jimmy Buffett, Don Henley. Don Henley, the opening act was the chick who sang, or the group that sang "I'm Walking on Sunshine." She only had one great hit. Christina and the Waves, yes. I got to see Heart. The stuff that I got to see and do because of radio stations is just amazing. And thank you, Indianapolis, for that. And for all of my records, cassettes, not 8-tracks, so don't get the thing that I'm too old. But that was awesome, though. So let's go into who were the favorite people that you were wanted to listen to or enjoyed listening to on radio.
Well, and I discussed him earlier, Gary Burbank. He was in Cincinnati mainly when I listened to him live, but he was also at WHS in Louisville, and he was also at CKLW in the 70s. And Gary Burbank, you can find a lot of his stuff here on YouTube. It was just, the guy was comic genius. He had a character named Gilbert Gnarly. He would call people, and he sounded like this, and I sound like I'm from a retirement home, and he always just led on people that he was just lost, and he would drag them on, for the longest time, and just crazy stuff like that. And then he does a kind of a daily thing called Earl Pitts, where he sounds like an American redneck and what things need to be done in this country, And so he's very expansive on that, and he's just kind of loony, and it was just great to always listen to Gary Burbank.
Mine would be a tie between Gary Todd and Bob Lamey.
Bob Lamey.
On
that's two ends of the spectrum. There you have Gary Todd, who was welcome this morning on WIBC, and then you have Bob Lamey, who's going to tell you about the hockey game last night.
Exactly. And then especially Gary Todd was fantastic, and he was great at WIBC, but then he thought he was bigger than his shorts and wanted more money.
Yeah. And when he went to Anderson or something like that.
Yeah, and then he came back, and it's just if you're making good money, man, just continue to make the good money and shut the hell up.
Just be humble.
Exactly. But WIBC, from giving the weather to giving the news, what's interesting too, especially in today's society, WIBC just gave you the news, not their opinion. I
Yeah.
don't. I don't need that today. I want to know when my hurricane is going to hit Houston, Texas, which is tomorrow at about 1 a.m. I want to know how big the cone is. I want to know if how many people got beamed in the Astros game because they cheated in the World
Yeah, they
Series a
cheated.
couple years ago. I want to know how hot it's going to be. What time can I get out and water my plants? I don't need to know your opinion on who do I need to pick for president, U.S. representative, state representative, or anything else that I need to know.
Yeah, exactly. Or their little angle on what they think about something was said. That's what always drives me nuts. It's like they just want to give you their little. It's like when you're having a conversation, a heated conversation with somebody, and they start putting these little salty little notes in there, and you're like, no, I don't need the salty little notes. I just need you to explain to me what you did wrong or what I
What
did right.
what
Or
the first
like,
lady said last night? I listened. I heard
yeah,
what she said. Don't interpret it for me or tell me your angle on it. Shut the hell up. Gosh, darn it. Okay,
exactly.
that's my rant.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, so who you have at number 4?
Number 4. We're gonna go up to Chicago for this one. Larry Lujak. If you're not familiar with Larry Lujak, he was very good disc jockey at WLS Chicago. He kind of had a disposition of, do I have to do this again? And that was Larry Lujak, and he would usually well, we have animal stories today, and he would have some story in the news that had it involved an animal, and it was usually something outlandish,
It's
and it got to be a big
kind of like
thing.
Les Nessman.
Yeah, kind of like a Les Nessman. It's probably, some of these people was based off of that, but I think Lujak was a little bit more. He was cranky, and he was kind of like, well, I'm doing it right, so why can't everybody else just conform to me? And so he was kind of interesting. And I think people like a Rush Limbaugh, if you listen to a Rush Limbaugh, whether you're on the left or the right, if you listen to him, a lot of his style was pulled from Lujak, and that's with the paper rustling, the pauses, and then the little retort about something. That was very Lujak. If you listen to Lujak, you will see where people were inspired by that type of behavior on the radio.
My number 4 is Paul Harvey.
Oh yeah, Paul Harvey's great.
Oh my gosh! And people out there right now watching will probably or listening will probably go, "Who in the hell is Paul Harvey?" And he does
Good.
just look it up on YouTube. You find some great stuff. Just the way that he would pause, the
Mhm.
way that he would say stuff was just outstanding and great stuff. And you're never ever going to see that on radio ever again. I
Yeah.
love Paul Harvey. Love him.
Well, he
You
was
know,
almost like a philosopher for this time.
yes, I agree with that. And when you get somebody like a major radio station like Q95 to mimic you, you know that you're someone special on radio.
Well, that's another one. Like when we talked about Gary Burbank, he had a spoof called Saul Harvey, and it was basically the evil version of Paul Harvey. And he would talk the same way. He'd go, "This is Saul Harvey," and he would, instead of talking about what good could be found, he would talk about what bad could be found in something. So it was Paul Harvey's evil brother Saul Harvey.
And what I found interesting is that Q95 took a thing from Paul Harvey, and this is a little dirty but not obscene. Is that how he would pause and do his good day, things like that. They did a play on him, and it said that rubbing a frog will not give you warts, but it will give the frog a boner. Good day.
They did really good.
Good stuff.
That
Good
sounds
stuff.
like them. Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds like Q95.
Okay, so what number you on for DJs?
Okay, so I think we've knocked 2 of them down. So we would be on 3. I would go with Jerry Baker.
Oh
He was on
man.
IBC. He was mostly on TV from my memory. But Jerry Baker was pretty much the voice of I always thought Indiana sports. He did the Pacers games on TV, on radio, and I know he had some occasions on WIBC where he would probably play music and things like that. So Jerry Baker. Plus, I got to meet Jerry Baker, Mr. Baker, about a year and a half ago at Newcastle at the Hall of Fame Classic, and I had him sign something for me. So.
A very quiet guy, from what you've told me too.
Yes, he's pretty quiet. I think he's kind of to himself. He just happens to be somebody we all know from his work, and I think that's kind of where he keeps it. So.
I mean, you could play his voice, and I could pick it up just immediately, and and just you don't Tom Carnegie, Jerry Baker.
Yes.
I mean,
certain voices.
Yes, I wasn't a huge fan of former Butler University, former Purdue Boilermaker, former, I think he was an Indiana Mr. Basketball and played for the Tech Titans, Indianapolis Tech. Joe Sexton is another one of those voices that you could hear, and you know exactly who you're listening to. What was the guys he was in Hoosiers? Howard.
Hilliard Gates.
Hilliard Gates, okay.
Yeah.
Where did I get Howard from? Howard Kellerman, I think, was from the Indianapolis Indians.
You may have been thinking of Howard Caldwell from WRTV.
Oh, my gosh. We could go with TV anchors.
We'll have to do TV the next time around.
Oh, my gosh. You can roll about Derek Thomas.
Yeah, he
for
just
the
retired.
News.
Yeah.
Channel 6.
Yeah, that is Derek Thomas.
Ed Sorensen. I did an interview with Dick Ray.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Don Hine and he'd have to, when I played basketball against Don Hine, he'd have to wear the sweatband to keep the hair down pat. Okay, so we're getting away from it a little bit. Okay, my apologies. Okay, so my number 3, and I just listened I just loved listening to him in the early 90s, was Jimmy Mad Dog Matus.
Mm-hmm.
I just loved Jimmy Mad Dog Matus. And, you know, it doesn't help that when I worked for the Finish Line, once I graduated from Indiana State University, that Jimmy came and did a spot. I don't know what they call them now.
Remote.
Yeah, remote, yes. And we had to do this and that at the Speedway Finish Line at Speedway, Indiana. And just a great guy and very very talented. I don't know what happened to him.
Well, he was one of those cases where he got laid off from Clear Channel, or iHeart, whoever owns Q95 now. So he was just one of those casualties of the business, to where they thought, well, we'll just bring somebody in or have somebody stretch their shift out. And I've seen people ask what happened to him, but nobody seems to know exactly where he's at.
Because he'd be great on Sirius or any kind of iHeart Radio or a podcast. He was very talented very talented guy, and I enjoyed listening to him and the entertainment that he would bring, of course, on my favorite channel, WFPQ.
Right. That's a pretty good one. Let's see. Mentioned him earlier. Don Imus.
Imus in the morning.
Who would get himself in trouble with his mouth at times, but much like Lou Jack, he would kind of express your disdain over something, or your aggravation, or he would say things that nobody else would say, because maybe at the time it wasn't considered professional. Like one time he just called David Letterman a jerk, which he didn't like something that he was doing, so he's a jerk. He didn't like George Steinbrenner because he thought he was a fat goon from Cleveland, and just the verbiage is just hilarious to me, that he would come up with this stuff, and just him insulting somebody would sound hilarious, whereas usually it sounds, oh, okay, get over it, But,
would you agree that besides Howard Stern, who can say anything he wants to say because he's on a channel where you can say anything you want to say, the shock jocks are no longer?
Probably not, and I think everything kind of hits a wall, and although I'm not particularly fond of the shock jock thing, because the type of humor that's involved, and Imus probably got a lot of that at times, but there's other things about Imus I liked. But yeah, it's like you can only say so much, and over a period of time it's all been said, and what else are you going to say that's going to shock people? Everything is so out front anymore that people are walking around with this stuff on their t-shirts that you never would have seen years ago. So I think people have desensitized to that, and so it would take a lot to really shock somebody.
Did you enjoy Man Cow?
I never listened to Man Cow.
Man Cow in the morning in Chicago. I can't remember what station he was on, but when I was with a company and traveled to Chicago extensively, Man Cow, shock jock, Howard Stern wannabe, or maybe Howard Stern was a Man Cow wannabe, but that kind of. You know what's interesting? Everybody we've talked about too. Uh, you're probably going to hear 3 or 4 songs.
Yeah.
Most of it's going to be fun and opinionated and stuff like that and call in stuff and stuff like that, which I enjoyed.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
So it's like kind of a interactive, I guess you can
yeah.
say. Or back and forth.
So my number one, because
Hmm.
yours next choice is number one, right?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Looks like. Yep.
My number one DJ, I don't know if you would. Well, no, I guess my number two is that I
Your
really,
two, yeah.
yeah, number two. So I really enjoyed Christy Lee, Laura Steele, and Ace Cosby from Q95.
Hmm. So you want those three as your number two?
Yeah,
I gotta. Yeah. That's a pretty good one.
yeah. I mean,
Ace was big.
they all played pretty good music.
Hmm.
Of course of course Christy Lee was a part of the Bob and Tom show, but when
Hmm.
they were on, they played good music. There's a different setup when it comes to playing commercials and stuff like that when you're on radio because you do have to pay bills.
Yep.
But I enjoyed Laura Still, Christy Lee, and Ace Crosby.
Hmm. All three really good. I think Laura Steele is at. I think she's on the TV side now, maybe Wish TV. Ace is, of course, with Bob and Tom. But he got laid off several years ago with Q95. But I think when it came around, they needed somebody. Bob and Tom hired him back, and he's kind of their producer now.
One thing that I do enjoy seeing, but I never ever wanted to see, and I have not seen a picture of Ace Cosby. Because there's some people you don't want to know
Oh,
just that messes with your mind when
yeah,
you understand what I'm saying?
yeah. There's been some people. That's one of the interesting things about radio is you wonder what do they look like, and there's been a few where I've nailed them in my mind. Like I know exactly what they look, and they look exactly like that. But there's been some of them I see them, I'm like, whoa, I didn't think that person looked anything like that. And yeah, but
It,
you've never
it's
seen Ace.
it's interesting because I have a friend who lives down the way. He's 83 years old. His name's
Yeah.
Fred. He used to come down for movie night every Wednesday night, but because of the COVID, we don't do that anymore. But he had a friend named Roy, and I said, every time you talk about this guy named Roy, I picture Wilford Brimley, who possibly had the Beatus. He
Diabetes.
used to do all those commercials. And
Right.
Fred sent me a picture one day. I'm like, God, he did look like Wilford Brimley. May he rest in peace. But it's interesting, and there's some people, there's just some people that you just, I didn't want to see the guy who did the voice of the Lone Ranger, because I used to pick up those audio cassettes at Marsh supermarkets.
Mm.
I never wanted to see the guy who did the voice of the Lone Ranger because I got to see the guy who did the Lone Ranger when he was on TV, and I didn't want to be, confused with it. So that's That's very interesting. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, and it's funny as many run-ins as you've had with Indianapolis radio that you have not seen Ace. So
I have not.
yeah, I've not. I remember I saw him at the state fair back probably 20 years ago, and I think it was at Q95 used to have a booth there. They sell T-shirts and stickers, and at some point they quit doing it, but he was there,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Who's that?" And they announced he was on a remote, and he was like, "This is Ace Cosby." And I'm like, "That's Ace Cosby."
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Big guy.
uh, he's not small.
So I
If
got the
you
Wilford Brimley and I got the Ace Crosby or Ace
if you've
Cosby,
never
whatever it
seen
is.
him, let's say if you've never seen him, and if you do see him, you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
I don't mean that in any bad way. I just think you would be surprised.
So am I unveiling my number one?
Uh,
Or you?
I'll go ahead and do it.
Go ahead.
I'll give you the grand finale. All right, number one DJ. He is gone now. He passed about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago now. His name was Joe Donovan, and he was on WHAS in Louisville. He was on the overnight show for the better part of 20 years, from about 77 to 97, until he was eventually, they wanted to get rid of music, and he had to go ahead and retire. Now I have a clip of him, and Joe, being on the overnight show, was a very laid-back person. He was very into the oldies. Joe had a collection of records, and I'm talking the little 45 records. I think in the number of upwards to 30,000 records in his personal collection. And he would play these on the radio. He would take requests, and he would have what he called an odd and obscure hour. So about 3 o'clock in the morning, he would play some of the most obscure stuff that you would never heard, never hear again type of songs. And in the community of people that have collections of old recordings, that 3 o'clock hour is one of the most popular that you run across, because people have the recording of that song, and he'll talk about it. And it might have never been printed again, but just if you want to hear a little clip, and he was just very good for the overnight hours. So this is a little bit of him going from one song to another, and it kind of cutting over the song, so we'll hear that.
Could be the last time. Rolling Stones, 1965, on 84 WHAS. It's 12:43 here with Joe Donovan. Let's hang around 1965 a little longer on that same hit parade from that same year. Ina Noon, who's 45 today. This hit from Herman's Hermits. Ina Noon, Herman's Hermits ain't that just a little bit better. Noon's 45 today. Requests that you might have, by the way, for Peter Noon, Herman's Hermits, or for Paul Simon, their birthdays today. Call them in, and we'll try to include some of their music along the way in the regular run tonight. 12:45 on 84 WHAS.
So that was Joe Donovan, and if you can imagine 5 hours of that, if you're working the night shift, that was very calming. He wasn't excited. He wasn't depressing. He was just kind of like your friend. And it was several years after he retired, I sent him an email. I found his email and sent it to him, and he was very appreciative of somebody like me, who was actually quite a bit younger, who had listened to him for several years. But Joe Donovan is probably one of my favorites, and we actually have a page for him on Facebook, just to people share audio, and because people all over the U.S. are on there, and they would listen to him at night. It's talk about that Skywave thing. There was some people in California that would occasionally pick up the show. And of course, it was earlier in the evening for them, so it's just one of those AM radio phenomenons where he had kind of a cult following, and nobody else really knows about him anymore. So, Joe Donovan.
What would you think of Wolfman Jack?
Wolfman Jack was he was like entertaining in, I think, just the crazy stuff he did, and he kind of had that voice, talk like that. That would probably get a little old after a while, but he was entertaining. I've heard quite a bit of him, and he was on WNBC for a while in the mid 80s, and actually in the 70s too, but he got fired in the 70s because Cousin Brucey at WABC outrated him, basically. And then he came back in the 80s, but he was doing like canned shows where he'd do audio, and he would send it in, they would play it all into the jingles and the music and stuff. So Wolfman Jack kind of had his own thing, but he was famous mainly because of the American Graffiti
And
movie.
also there was it Alan Reed?
Alan Reed. That's escaping me right now.
Once at the beginning of rock and roll. But
Alan Freed.
Alan Freed, sorry. Yes, Freed.
He got involved in the whole payola thing. That was the originally, you pay to play kind of thing.
Right, which I still think that happens today, although
Yeah.
I'm going to say
There's ways of it too, I think. They've legalized it, but they've masked it in other...
Exactly. So Wolfman Jack / I loved... They didn't play music. They probably played 3 songs. I was a huge Bob and Tom fan.
Yeah.
Huge Bob and Tom fan. It was Saturday Night Live on radio, but for 4 hours.
Helium Mondays.
Yeah. With Chick McGee, Christy Lee, Mark Patrick, what was the weather girl from WTHR?
Pat Carlini.
Pat Carlini.
Yeah.
The list goes on, and the people that they've really kind of promoted, or the people that have made money from that show besides Bob and Tom.
Oh, yeah.
The list goes on and on and on.
Exactly. I always thought Bob was the if you would pick a funniest one between the two, and Bob was, because Bob was super witty. Bob would just, somebody would be talking, he would snap off something just hilarious, you know.
And even if it wasn't funny, his laugh was
yeah, it was
intoxicating.
infectious.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
that was one thing I always remember. When I was a kid, I always call them professional laughers, because I thought, well, they laugh in such a way, it's like it's almost pre-mixed or something. Like, ha, 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 ha. And that was funny just to hear him laugh.
Exactly. Just if you get a chuckle from him just like that, you could have been not as funny as you could not have been you could not have been funny, but he laughed at you. But both Bob and Tom just Donnie Baker came from there, who still blows my mind. That's Ron Sexton that used to do the IHSAA basketball tournament. Still blows my mind, by the way.
I know. I didn't realize that actually until a while back. Because I remember watching Ron Sexton when he was on Indie TV doing those games, and I put it together one day. I'm like, and I looked at the old and I saw his face. I'm like, let me put that long hair on him or something. And then I watched and I'm like, that's him. He just broke out of that shell. And
that man has millions of followers on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram,
YouTube.
YouTube. My God.
He lives in Florida now, I think, and he's got a big.
Where to God?
Yeah. Let me tell you, I gotta go. It's Randy's calling over me.
So very nice. So did we complete our list of top 5 radio stations and top 5 DJs?
We did, and we'll have to do TV here soon because we can really get it. And that'd be
gosh, TV. We're going to have a second episode of the Billy and Joe Show with special guest host Adam Hamby from the land of mini basketball courts and Hoosier Garage. We will do the top 5 TV stations / TV personalities.
We only had he had the 3 networks, but
you can't forget WTTV.
We had a few of them, but we could probably, which one was the best?
Exactly. I mean, you got Don Hine, Ed Sorensen, you have Dick Ray, Ed Harding. Gosh, the list goes on and on.
The most controversial one in there probably would have been Chet Kopic or something.
But Chet Kopic was
not really though.
Right, and then what was the other guy's name? Duffy, Reed Duffy.
Reed Duffy, yeah, he was
Reed Duffy.
RTV. He would do all the food restaurant reviews.
Man,
what a job!
Exactly. Well, Adam Hamby, thank you so much for joining us on the Billy and Joe Top 10 show. We did the top 5 today. Of course, Joe, when he's on the show, likes to do top 20 plus 5.
7,000.
But that's okay, Joe. We miss you.
Yeah,
we're going to be back with our the top 10 Billy. Okay, the Billy and Joe Top 10 show is going to be back again, and we're going to do the top 20 most influential concerts, that be it musicians or comedians that we've ever actually attended. So please keep a lookout for that. But Adam Hamby, thank you so much. Please go to Adam Hamby's YouTube channel, the Hoosier Garage. Go to his Facebook page, the Land of Mini Basketball Courts. As you can see, let me see if there we go. You can see my Broadwell basketball court on there before they destroyed the high school gymnasium and built a new one. Of course, Broadwell High School is not around any longer, but Adam does fantastic stuff. Inbox him at Land of Mini Basketball Courts on Facebook. Adam, thank you once again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Billy. Appreciate it.
Anything you want to toss in?
Just come check out my my YouTube and the Land of Mini Basketball Courts. I got so many things I got my hands into. Just love to have you all along. So we appreciate that.
Thank you again, Adam.
Thank you.